A lot of it was that trickle. It did start primarily with events because we wanted to work on increasing our show rate, increasing the number of students that would register in general. And like I said, parents are the ones that are typically driving students down the road to campus. And we wanted to make sure that if they thought something was a good idea to learn more about a college, that they were also the ones hearing about it.
Welcome to Mission Admissions, a podcast that helps higher ed become better recruiters, communicators, marketers, and leaders. I'm your host, Jeremy Tiers, and every other week I'll share my candid conversations with industry leaders and difference makers from both inside and outside of higher ed. You'll walk away with advice, tips, and strategies to help you both professionally and personally. Mission Admissions is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher ed professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. You can learn more at element451.com. Hey everybody, it's Jeremy Tiers, and this is episode 60 of the Mission Admissions podcast. Parents and guardians continue to be the number one outside influencer during the college surge for most traditional students. So today I'm excited to sit down with Derek Faasse from Capital University and have a conversation about some of the cool things they're doing in terms of parent-specific strategies, because his admissions team, specific to a lot of the events they're doing and communications, are really doing a lot to make that group feel like a valued partner, I'll say, in this entire process. Welcome to the show, Derek.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Derek, do you remember the tipping point or just like a conversation? Maybe it was like, like the 10th conversation in a row, but like, when was the tipping point when you were like, okay, like we're not doing enough with parents, it has to change, and then, you took action? Like, talk us through that.
I'm glad you mentioned the 10th conversation in a row, because that's a little bit closer than a tipping point. It was mostly a series of questions, primarily from our vice president of enrollment management after she had started. Do you do this? Why or why not? And then explaining best practices surrounding some of the steps we needed to take. And a lot of that centered around what we were putting in front of families, households, not just the students, not just the texts, but what goes to the actual house, what goes to the people that are there driving the student to a campus visit, or ultimately potentially writing that check to the college.
So let's talk about how that process started then, because I'm sure some schools, right? I know for a fact some schools are like, we're going to build out a whole year-long plan of different touch points, and here's what we're going to do with events, and we started really small, just with a couple of mailings here, or we focused really on just our daily tours and how we could improve certain things. Like, talk us through kind of the execution then of, okay, this was our tipping point. We knew we had to do more with parents, so here's how we started doing that.
Yeah, a lot of it was that trickle. It did start primarily with events because we wanted to work on increasing our show rate, increasing the number of students that would register in general. And like I said, parents are the ones that are typically driving students down the road to campus. And we wanted to make sure that if they thought something was a good idea to learn more about a college, that they were also the ones hearing about it, not just the student. We started adding parent-specific emails rather than just copying parents. Part of that was necessary. We realized our CRM would unsubscribe the student if a parent unsubscribed from a message that they were copied on. So we had to split them. But then if they were split, why not start sending parent-specific messages that are different than what the students are receiving, that speak more to somebody a generation or two above?
So talk a little bit about that. Like, what was different, whether it's a language thing, a content thing, the way you framed a topic in those parent messages versus what a student would be getting?
It was typically centered around, I'll say, later. So we were talking to the students about student life opportunities, scholarship opportunities, what to do when they first showed up on campus. We were talking to parents about investment, what they got after a student graduated, why we were a great choice for a student's education, not just to get into, but to continue at, and really trying to put some walking the walk instead of just talking the talk about recruiting that whole family.
And so what did you ultimately see from an ROI standpoint? Because you and I were talking as we started recording, and you were like, man, we just finished this huge admitted student event and we literally had all but one person show up, which is unbelievable. And I have no doubt in part because of you communicating more with parents. But like, let's go back to those earlier days. What were some of the, we'll call it ROI things then you saw early on in terms of, wow, parents were really communicating more with us or asking a different kind of question, in addition to it obviously helping, for example, like the show rate and things like that at events?
Yeah, we obviously saw it influence our show rate. We learned we can't really over communicate when it comes to telling parents where to be, what the event's about, what we're going to feed them. But we also saw a lot of influence on actually getting questions asked in the first place. Parents were a lot more likely to bring forward questions about what might be next in their student's process. Parents were a lot more likely to ask those hard-hitting questions that might help them realize that capital is a great fit for their family, for their student. Or parents are more likely to be honest and say, it's time for us to move on from this decision. And I think no matter what that course of action that they took was, it was really telling us we were going in the right direction with using them as a big recipient of our communications.
From a frequency standpoint, I mean, even right now, as you're communicating with different parent groups, how often typically are you sending out different messages, and what is that medium? Is it purely email, or are you guys utilizing text messaging at all? Like talk us through kind of the different comms then that you're doing it.
It's primarily email. It typically mirrors how often we email students. So for some of the next steps in our process, roughly every 14 days. For some of our event communications, roughly every 7 days. Our big ones that we've added tend to be stuff that shows up in the mailbox and a pretty robust student and staff phone call campaign that happens surrounding all of our events and most of our big next steps as we're pushing toward that final decision. When it comes to putting something in the mail, we try and stick with Ohio. Once we spread beyond the borders of our state, it does get a little, I'll say expensive. It's not something that a school our size is able to manage just quite yet. When it comes to phone calls, we try and make sure that students have demonstrated interest to us in some other fashion before. Maybe they've visited campus previously. Maybe they've clicked on some of our emails. Maybe they've emailed us in the past. Maybe they fit into some of our geographic boundaries. We found students are a lot more likely to attend Capital University if they live within 60 miles, a lot more likely if they live within 100 miles, and then weirdly enough, very likely if they live outside of 900 miles. So we try and find some bands where students are more likely to pick up the phone or more likely to, see a voicemail pop up on their phone and respond to that via email or by taking an action.
So then as you started obviously doing more with parents, especially in terms of these events that you're talking about, right? Like I know, for example, you shared with me, hey, at certain events, we break parents up and we actually give them the opportunity to meet with parents of current students to talk more about things like the investment they're going to make going to a school like Capital. Talk us through just how you shape content specifically, especially for those admitted student events for parents, Derek.
Yeah, we're lucky to have a few different ways to tackle that. And that's one of my favorite additions we've seen to our events since I've started here at Capital. The reviews are always really positive. We tend to have a lot of families that are late to their next session because of being engaged in the conversation. You've got to take the good with the bad, I suppose. But I think what we really do help sell that recruiting the whole family aspect. We actually have a couple faculty members that we lean on pretty heavily. One of them was a parent of a Capital student before realizing that Capitol was a place where they could be a teacher, where they could help push forward what we were doing and what they believed their child was getting a huge benefit from. And so now they're a faculty member here. They've got a graduate. They're able to tell families about, why they made that leap, why they believe that Capitol is worth that investment. We've also got the opposite, a current faculty member who had a ton of options for helping fund their child's education because of various tuition exchange programs. And they decided Capitol was that best fit through no shortage of a college search that involved dozens of schools from around the country. So we like to lean on them. When families are separated from parents and students, the parents tend to ask some more of those hard-hitting questions because they feel they don't have the ability to immediately embarrass their child. Maybe, what is safety like? My kid doesn't drive a car or refuses to drive a car. Are they going to be okay? My kid maybe a little too much likes parties, and what's going to be going on at Capitol University for them. They're able to talk about, not necessarily in a bad way, but some more adult things that are all part of that college experience without, having to worry about how their child perceives that. And on the flip side, as everybody knows, students do the same thing. When they're separated from their parents, they'll ask the student panels, what are the parties like? Where can I go hang out? What is a football game at? They're right down the street, Ohio State University like. So it really helps drive those conversations forward about what that experience is going to be for either party.
What are some of the things about, during the daily visit, if we think of that, right? Because obviously that's another extremely important touch point where parents, I feel like, as I talk with people, sometimes feel like an afterthought, right? It's, we go on this tour and like they say hi to us and they kind of make small talk with us, but like 98% of the visit is just talking with our son or daughter, right? Or the student. What are you all doing? And if it's, hey, we're working on it, fine. But like, what are you doing, Derek, in that regard that you're finding is working well?
I think your last question was a perfect segue, is that we try and make it more conversational. Every accepted student at Capitol University, we don't put them in our presentation. We have an individual conversation with the family. It might be at the exact same time. It might be earlier or later than we're typically presenting to families, but we pull aside all accepted families, pull them into one of our main family offices, and we talk with them, not just talk at them or talk to them, but really find out if they have questions about what is next for their child, if they have questions for what is next in the academic program, and what they need to know before moving on to those next steps. We also, send them on that campus tour so they can see the place one more time. But after that, we connect them directly with the people they need to be connected with, whether that's financial aid, whether that's academic advising, whether that's our career services for students that might be undecided. If they are decided about what they want to study, we bring them to that academic area. They're probably meeting with a faculty member, dean, department head, somebody that can help the family make sure they know what that investment is all about and what's next. And so that student can start getting excited about the classes they're going to take or what facilities they're going to have access to. But we really try and make sure that it is personal. And it's silly, but we also have things that I feel are more parent-centric when anybody visits. Things like coffee, tea, water. We always try and make sure they know a little bit more about Columbus when they leave, whether they're Columbus natives and they just need to know what they can continue being involved in. Or we just had a student from California fly in last week for a visit. I let them know, here's all the great places that I think you should try at least something to eat from in the surrounding 5 miles. Did they do it? I don't know. They haven't texted me back yet. They just flew back out this morning. But we want to make sure that they are invested in the area. And that's generally, we found something that really resonates with parents because of our location with the big city in our backyard. I think there's a lot of pluses and minuses with that, with a lot of families. And we try and make sure that everything they leave with is transparent, but also positive.
So you've been doing this a number of years at multiple institutions, Derek. Just thoughts on just the shifts that you've seen even over the last 5 to 10 years when it comes to like parental involvement / all of this parent conversation communication that we've been talking about today?
I still remember my very first admission professional development was in Lansing, Michigan in 2012. And the conversation then, maybe it was specific to the people that were there, maybe it was specific to the Midwest, was that the students are the ones that are going to be taking the classes. It's their choice. Parents are going to come up and say, we completed the application. We are wondering this. We want to know this. And we were told, well, no, you answer the student. You don't, the parent's just there. You're talking to the student, not the parent. And I don't know if I'm just getting older or if people are getting smarter, but that never resonated with me. If a parent's asking me a question about their child, why wouldn't I have that conversation with them? Why wouldn't I entertain their concerns, their excitements, their needs? And so I think the big shift has been that it's a family affair. It's not just the students going to college, so the student is the be all end all. I think making sure that families know what they're getting themselves into, because they pay for about 50% of all college tuition, and nearly every single parent gives something to a child's education, whether that's that deposit money, whether that's setting up that student loan, whether it's something. I mean, a lot of that funding for college is going through the family. And why wouldn't we really work on it from a investment standpoint? They are our investment, and college is that family's investment.
I'll put a bow on this by saying something that Derek said earlier and just reiterating it. It's a family process now. This is a family process. That's the way you have to look at it. There's very few students who go through this and literally do every single thing on their own. It takes a very unique situation. And one of the questions that we continue to ask on surveys, Derek, is, all right, students, you've made your decision. Here are a bunch of things. Check all the things your parents helped you with in this process. One of the options is they helped me with nothing. I did everything on my own. That's less than 10% of students saying that. And almost all of them, right, are checking a majority of the boxes, because there's very little, right, that they're actually doing in this process on their own. Derek, I end every podcast with something I call fun rapid fire. So I'm just going to give you a handful of things, and I want to get some quick thoughts from you on each, okay?
All right.
What's the hardest thing about being a composer for marching bands? Because fun fact about Derek, he writes a whole bunch of music for different groups across the country.
Hardest part is making people happy, but I'm been a preschool teacher. I've been in college admissions, so I'm getting the hang of it.
I like it. I've also heard you like to cook. So what's the favorite new recipe you've made in the past few months?
I have 4 kids at home, so I'll say the favorite is probably something like mac and cheese or scrambled eggs with cheese on top or something with cheese.
Okay. Well, I can tell you as a parent of a now teenager, my daughter still loves the Blue Box Kraft mac and cheese over any homemade mac and cheese.
That's how it goes.
You're a Western Michigan grad. Bigger football rival, Central Michigan or Toledo?
Central Michigan.
I assumed you were going to say that. But I thought for football, maybe Toledo, because they've been a little better.
We used to wheel a car onto campus in Central Michigan colors and beat it with sledgehammers. So it's easily Central Western rivalry.
Okay. If you had a walkout song, Derek, what would it be?
Oh, lately it'd have to be the Bluey theme song. My 3-year-old's really into Bluey, and that's the only thing that I'm whistling anytime I'm walking anywhere.
Love it. And what's the most meaningful item there in your office, Derek?
Most meaningful item in my office, I'm looking at them right now, is a couple college degrees that you can't see. You can't see behind me, but they took a lot of support from my family, from at the time my girlfriend, now my wife, through both of them, and even some of my kids accompanied me on the course of getting my master's degree. So I think that's pretty meaningful, just because of all the people that helped me get there.
I greatly appreciate you being open to sharing things today, Derek, and I know our conversation is going to help a lot of people, and I look forward to the next time we connect.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Mission Admissions is part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a number of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admission professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Allison Tercio, Day Cabilds, and so many other amazing leaders in the higher ed space. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create more meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. You can learn more at element451.com.